For 12 years, a shadow moved across the Soviet Union. Children disappeared from train stations. Young women vanished from bus stops. Bodies were found in forests and fields, mutilated, desecrated, destroyed beyond recognition. The investigators knew they were hunting a monster, but in a society that refused to acknowledge such evil could exist within its borders, the killer had the perfect cover. By the time he was caught, 52 lives had been taken, 52 families destroyed. This is the story of Andrei Chikatilo, the man who became known as the Red Ripper, the Rostov Ripper, the Butcher of Rostov, a family man, a former teacher, and one of history's most prolific serial killers. December 22, 1978. Shakhty, a coal mining town in the Rostov region of southern Russia. The temperature had dropped below freezing. Snow covered the streets. 9-year-old Lena Zakotnova left school at 3 in the afternoon. She never made it home. Her parents reported her missing immediately. For 2 agonizing days, volunteers and police searched the area. On December 24th, Christmas Eve, a factory worker discovered her body near the Grushevka River, partially hidden beneath ice and snow. The crime scene told a horrific story. Lena had been lured to an abandoned shack. She had been strangled, stabbed repeatedly, and sexually assaulted. The level of violence was extreme, far beyond what was necessary to kill. This was a crime driven by rage, by compulsion, by something deeper and darker than simple murder. The investigation began immediately. Police canvassed the neighborhood. They questioned known sex offenders in the area. One name emerged: Alexander Kravchenko, a man with a prior conviction for rape. Despite weak evidence and a questionable confession, Kravchenko was arrested, tried, and executed in 1984. Justice, it seemed, had been served, but investigators had made a fatal error. The real killer was a 42-year-old man named Andrei Chikatilo. He had recently purchased the small shack where Lena was killed. Neighbors reported seeing him with a young girl on the day of the murder. His name appeared in the investigation files. But Chikatilo was a respectable figure, a former schoolteacher, married with 2 children, working as a supply clerk. He wore glasses, spoke quietly, kept to himself. He didn't fit the profile of a violent criminal. Police questioned him briefly and moved on. It would be the first of many chances to stop him. All of them missed. For 3 years, Chikatilo did not kill again. He later claimed he was terrified by what he had done, haunted by visions of Lena's face. But in September 1981, the compulsion returned. He attempted to attack a young prostitute in a forest, but she escaped. The experience excited him. The fear, the violence, the control. It awakened something he could no longer suppress. In 1982, the killing began again, and this time it would not stop. June 1982. Larisa Tkachenko, a 17-year-old girl, disappeared from a bus stop near Rostov. Days later, her body was discovered in a forest clearing. The circumstances pointed to a violent crime. September 1982. Lubov Biryuk, 13 years old, vanished from a bus stop. Her remains were found in a forest. The case showed disturbing similarities to the previous incident. December 1982. Lubov Volobuyeva, 14 years old. Again, the same tragic pattern repeated. The community realized they were facing a serial offender. The murders shared unmistakable characteristics. Victims were approached at transportation hubs, train stations, bus stops, areas where strangers could blend in. They were lured into secluded forests with promises of food, money, or help. Once isolated, they were attacked with extreme violence. The killer used a knife. He stabbed his victims dozens of times, far more than necessary to kill. The wounds suggested frenzy, loss of control. But other aspects of the crimes showed planning and intelligence. Bodies were partially concealed. The killer left few forensic clues. He struck in different jurisdictions, making it difficult for police to connect the cases. And there was one detail that appeared in nearly every case. The victim's eyes had been stabbed or mutilated, sometimes removed entirely. By 1983, the pattern was undeniable. A serial killer was operating across the Rostov region. But Soviet authorities faced a problem. Officially, serial murder didn't exist in the USSR. The Communist Party maintained that such crimes were products of Western capitalism, symptoms of a decaying, corrupt society. In the Soviet Union, where the state provided for all and crime was supposedly minimal, the existence of a serial killer was ideologically unacceptable. Local police were ordered to keep the investigation quiet. Information was not shared between regions. The media was silent. And while bureaucrats debated ideology, the killing continued. 1983 saw at least 7 murders. 1984 brought at least 15 more. Children, teenagers, young women, and occasionally young men. The killer was not discriminating. He was opportunistic, predatory, constantly hunting. His job as a supply clerk required frequent travel throughout the region. He had access to trains, buses, and remote areas. He could disappear into the vast Soviet countryside and strike without warning. And he was careful. He avoided detection by varying his locations, his timing, his methods. He learned from each kill, becoming more efficient, more controlled. But patterns, once established, can be recognized. And in 1984, Soviet authorities finally acknowledged what local investigators had known for years. They were hunting a serial killer. A special task force was formed under Detective Major Mikhail Fetisov. Resources were allocated. Experts were consulted. Among them was psychiatrist Alexander Bukhanovsky, who was asked to create something almost unprecedented in Soviet law enforcement, a psychological profile of the killer. Bukhanovsky studied the crime scenes, the autopsy reports, the victimology. He concluded that the killer was a man in his 40s or 50s, likely married, employed in a job that required travel. He was educated, possibly intelligent, but he suffered from severe sexual dysfunction, likely impotence, which drove him to substitute violence for normal sexual activity. The mutilation of the eyes, Bukhanovsky theorized, was symbolic. In Russian folklore, the eyes of the dead can identify their killer. By destroying them, the killer was attempting to prevent being seen, even in death. The profile was remarkably accurate, but it would take 6 more years to prove it. September 1984. Police began intensive surveillance operations at train stations and bus stops throughout the Rostov region. Hundreds of men were stopped, questioned, and investigated. The net was tightening. On September 13, 1984, officers at the Rostov bus station noticed a middle-aged man behaving suspiciously. He was approaching young women, attempting to engage them in conversation. When they rejected him, he moved on to the next target. His name was Andrei Chikatilo. Police detained Chikatilo and searched his belongings. Inside his briefcase, they found a kitchen knife, a length of rope, a jar of Vaseline, and a dirty towel. When questioned, Chikatilo claimed the items were for work. He was calm, polite, cooperative. Officers were suspicious. His behavior matched the profile. His job involved travel. He had been seen at multiple locations where victims had disappeared. They arrested him on minor charges, theft of property from his workplace, and held him for questioning. For 3 months, investigators tried to connect Chikatilo to the murders. They searched his home, they interviewed his wife, his children, his co-workers. They found nothing concrete, no physical evidence, no witnesses, no confession. But they had one crucial piece of forensic evidence: semen samples recovered from several crime scenes. The samples indicated the killer had type AB blood, a relatively rare type in the Soviet population. Police took a blood sample from Chikatilo. The result came back: type A. The science seemed definitive. Chikatilo's blood type did not match the killer's. Despite the suspicious circumstances, despite the items found in his briefcase, despite his proximity to multiple crime scenes, investigators had no choice. In December 1984, Chikatilo was released. What no one knew, what Soviet forensic science had failed to account for, was that Chikatilo was a non-secretor, a rare biological condition in which the blood type expressed in blood differs from the blood type expressed in other bodily fluids. Chikatilo's blood was type A, his semen was type AB. This biological anomaly, this quirk of genetics, saved his life and doomed dozens more. The murders continued. May 1985, 2 victims. August 1985, 1 victim. 1986, 1 victim. 1987, 3 victims. 1988, 3 victims. 1989, 4 victims. The investigation had expanded to include over 300 detectives and support staff. Thousands of suspects had been questioned. DNA analysis was introduced in 1986, but Soviet forensic capabilities were limited. The killer remained one step ahead. Detective Viktor Burakov, who had dedicated years of his life to the case, was exhausted, frustrated, and demoralized. He had interviewed hundreds of suspects, followed countless leads, attended dozens of autopsies. He had seen the victims, their destroyed bodies, their mutilated faces, their empty eyes. And still, the killer walked free. By 1990, the official death toll had reached 48 confirmed victims. Investigators suspected there were more, bodies not yet found, murders not yet connected. The case had become a national embarrassment. The Soviet Union was collapsing, political structures were crumbling, and still a serial killer operated with apparent impunity. Burakov made a decision: return to basics, saturate the high-risk areas, put officers in the forests, at the train stations, along the railway lines. Watch, wait, and hope. On November 20th, 1990, plainclothes officers were conducting surveillance at Donetsk Station, a remote railway stop surrounded by dense forest. It was a cold, gray afternoon. Few passengers used the station. At approximately 3 p.m., a middle-aged man in a gray suit emerged from the forest. His clothing was disheveled, his face flushed. There were small reddish-brown stains on his cheek and ear. His hands were dirty. Officers noticed him immediately. He walked quickly toward the platform, glancing around nervously. When a train arrived, he boarded without hesitation. The officers followed him onto the train. At the next stop, they approached him and asked for identification. The man handed over his internal passport. Andrei Romanovich Chikatilo, born October 16, 1936. Occupation: supply clerk. Residence: Novocherkassk. The officers had no legal grounds to detain him. He had committed no visible crime, but they recorded the encounter in their logbook and noted his nervous demeanor, his stained clothing, and the fact that he had emerged from the forest near a known dump site. 3 days later, when Vadim Gromov's body was discovered in that same forest, investigators reviewed all recent activity in the area. One name stood out: Andrei Chikatilo. Detectives pulled Chikatilo's file, and there it was. His name had appeared in the investigation before. In 1984, he had been arrested, questioned, and released. His blood type had cleared him. But now, forensic science had advanced.
Investigators understood non-secretor status. They knew that blood type alone was not definitive. On November 20th, 1990, Chikatilo was placed under 24-hour surveillance. For 9 days, undercover officers followed him. They watched as he approached children at bus stops. They saw him attempt to lure young women with offers of food and money. They documented his movements, his behavior, his predatory patterns. On November 20th, they had seen enough. Andrei Chikatilo was arrested. For 6 days, Chikatilo denied everything. He claimed he was innocent, that he was being framed, that the evidence was fabricated. Interrogators pressed him, confronted him with facts, showed him photographs of the victims. He remained silent. Then, on November 26th, psychiatrist Alexander Bukanovsky entered the interrogation room. He carried a document, his psychological profile of the killer, written 6 years earlier. Bukanovsky sat across from Chikatilo and began to read aloud. He described a man tormented by shame, by inadequacy, by a compulsion he could not control. He spoke of sexual dysfunction, of rage, of a need to dominate and destroy. He described the mutilation of the eyes, the frenzied stabbing, the ritualistic nature of the crimes. As Bukanovsky spoke, Chikatilo's demeanor changed. His shoulders slumped, his face softened, tears appeared in his eyes. And then he began to talk. Over the following weeks, Chikatilo confessed to 56 murders, 4 more than police had attributed to him. He led investigators to burial sites they had never found. He described his victims in disturbing detail, how he lured them, where he killed them, what he did to their bodies. He claimed he was driven by uncontrollable urges. He said he experienced sexual arousal only through violence. The stabbing, the blood, the destruction, these were the only ways he could achieve satisfaction. He described hearing voices, feeling compelled to hunt, being unable to resist. He said he felt like 2 people, Andrei, the husband, the father, the worker, and the other Andrei, the one who killed.
The trial began on April 14, 1992, in Rostov-on-Don. For security, Chikatilo was kept inside a locked iron cage in the courtroom. Victims' families packed the gallery. Many shouted at him, demanding his death. Others wept silently. Chikatilo's behavior was erratic and bizarre. He stripped naked during testimony. He waved pornographic magazines at the judge. He shouted incoherent statements about being a victim himself. Some observers believed he was feigning insanity to avoid execution. Court-appointed psychiatrists examined him and determined he was legally sane and fit to stand trial. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence: forensic analysis, witness testimony, Chikatilo's own confessions, and physical evidence recovered from his home and the crime scenes. The defense argued that Chikatilo was mentally ill and not fully responsible for his actions. On October 15, 1992, after a 6-month trial, the judge delivered the verdict: guilty on 52 counts of murder and 3 counts of sexual assault. 4 cases were dismissed due to insufficient evidence. The sentence? Death. Chikatilo appealed the verdict, but his appeal was denied. On February 14, 1994, Valentine's Day, he was executed by a single gunshot to the back of the head in a soundproofed room at Novocherkassk prison. He was 57 years old. His body was cremated. His ashes were disposed of. No grave marker exists. The case of Andrei Chikatilo exposed deep flaws in Soviet society: bureaucratic inefficiency, ideological denial, and the failure to protect the most vulnerable. It marked a turning point in Russian law enforcement, leading to reforms in criminal investigation and forensic science. But the true cost cannot be measured in policy changes or procedural improvements. 52 lives were taken. 52 families were destroyed. Mothers who never saw their children again. Fathers who searched forests for years. Siblings who grew up with empty chairs at the dinner table.
For 12 years, the man responsible lived among them, a neighbor, a co-worker, a stranger on a train platform, invisible, undetected, unstoppable, until, finally, he was.